Hey guys, it's Bella and welcome back to my channel. So before we get into anything, I want to apologize for how friggin' echoey this room is right now. It is completely full. I have a rug down. I have no idea what's going on. It might be the concrete floors. Even though I have a rug down, I don't know what's going on, but I'm sorry. This is just temporary anyway. I know that, or you guys might know that I've changed. Oh, also, if you heard that, there's a thunderstorm right now, so I apologize if that's annoying, but also I kind of feel like that's perfect and like really sets the mood for a mystery video. Am I right? You may have noticed that I changed my settings and background for my mystery videos, and now I'm back in this kind of space. This is just temporary. I am still going to be doing my mystery videos in more of a chilled out, casual setting, so we can just sit down like friends and talk about mysteries with some tea, some popcorn, you know, whatever you feel like eating, kale, your prerogative. But our bed base doesn't get delivered till tomorrow, so hopefully the echoiness is not as bad there in the next setup. But anyway, I'm gonna stop babbling on. Today is the first day of Mystery Week for Halloween. I know it's a little bit late, but if you guys follow me on Instagram, you would know that we've had some issues. So it is a day late, but I'm still gonna be doing the entire week of mysteries. I'm not gonna be cutting it off short. So yeah, let's just go ahead and get into it. So in today's video, we're gonna be talking about the disappearance of Malaysian Airlines flight MH370. And honestly, this case, and I know I say this probably about a lot of cases, but is the most confusing and frustrating case literally ever. And if I could choose to solve just one case, I would have the most trouble picking between this case and the Madeleine McCann case. Like I feel like normally with every video that I do, I have like a solid theory that I really strongly believe. I mean, there is one theory that I kind of believe the most out of all of them, but so frustrating. And the thing about this case is there was 239 people on board and their families are in the same boat as everyone else. They have no idea what happened. They don't have closure. There are so many people that are affected by this case and they may never get any closure. So I'm first going to talk about what happened, everything you need to know about MH370. Well, not everything. There is so much information on this case that if you do want to know everything, then you're definitely going to have to do some of your own research because I'm just not going to be able to fit it all in. There are so many theories and just so much information, but I'm going to give a bit of a background for those of you who somehow have never heard of this case, and then we're going to talk about a few theories. So in 2014, on the 8th of March, a Boeing 777, which if you don't know is like a gigantic plane, just literally disappeared off the face of the planet. It was a routine flight, one of two routine flights that took place every single day from Kuala Lumpur International Airport to Beijing Capital International Airport. Did I say Beijing? We had just said Beijing. As I mentioned, there were 239 people on board. 227 of these were passengers and then 12 of them were crew members, and these people were literally from all over the world. I think there was like 6 of them that were from Australia. Most of them were from China. I think there was something like 153 or 158 of them were from China. And the eldest person on the flight was 76 years old, while the youngest person on the flight was just 23 months old. There were 2 pilots on the plane. First was the captain, who was Zahari Ahmad Shah, and he was 53 years old. And then there was the co-pilot, Farik Abdul Hamid, who was 27 years old. Shah was somewhat of a veteran pilot. He had been flying with Malaysian Airlines since 1981 and had 18,000 hours of flying under his belt, which is a lot of hours of flying. He was a very experienced pilot and flying was his passion. It was what he loved to do, like his job. You know the saying that if you do what you love, then you won't work a day in your life? I feel like that was the case for him. He even went above and beyond and had a flight simulator at his house, which definitely is not a regulation for pilots. He just loved it. He spent so much time on it. And like pilots do have to do mandatory hours of a flight simulator, but they definitely did not have to have one at their house. That was above and beyond. Hamid had only done 2,700 hours at this point, and it was actually his first time flying on a Boeing 777 without a training captain. And he had been in a little bit of trouble before. I think it was about 2 to 3 years before flight MH370. He invited a few girls into the cockpit of the aircraft while him and the captain were smoking, which obviously is extremely against the rules. So this kind of did make people question whether he was responsible or not. So the plane departed Kuala Lumpur at 12:40 a.m. and then was due to land in Beijing at 6:40 a.m. with a flight time of about 5 hours and 34 minutes, I think it was. So they were flying directly there, and they were due to fly north over the Gulf of Thailand and Vietnam. So a little bit of background, a flight of this duration would require 82,000 pounds of jet fuel. But MH370 had 108,000 pounds of jet fuel, and this is standard just as a little bit of reserve fuel in case for whatever reason something went wrong and they couldn't land in Beijing. They did have enough fuel to get to a nearby airport just somewhere else in China. So with 108,000 pounds of jet fuel, this would get them, I think it was about 7 hours and 30 minutes. So as I said, the plane departed as scheduled from Kuala Lumpur at 12:40 a.m. At around 1:20 a.m., Captain Shah, or it is believed that it was Captain Shah who made this transmission, made the last ever transmission that flight MH370 would ever make and ended the transmission with "Goodnight Malaysian 370. This honestly wasn't anything out of the ordinary, although it might have seemed unordinary the way that I said it, but they were changing between Malaysian airspace and Vietnam airspace. So yeah, it really wasn't anything out of the ordinary for him to have ended the transmission by saying this. But what was weird was just a few minutes after this transmission, the plane shut everything down. The transponder is what I think most people say was shut down, but literally everything was shut down and the plane disappeared. So after all of the communication and transmissions devices were switched off, the plane immediately did literally like a U-turn and headed west. So it was going in like the complete opposite direction. It flew across Peninsular Malaysia, turning south of Penang to the northwest and then towards the Indian Ocean. The aircraft then sent out a final automated satellite communication at 8 a.m. and this did not contain any information about where the plane was. So this was kind of like the last known contact, I suppose, and then after that it's believed that the plane ditched. All this does for us, or this satellite, the automated satellite does for us, is prove that the plane was in the air about 7.5 hours after it departed. And it is widely believed that the plane then crashed into the deep southern Indian Ocean. After this, honestly, the entire situation was handled really badly. First of all, Vietnamese air traffic controllers failed to question the disappearance for 12 minutes. On top of that, it wasn't until 5 hours and 13 minutes after the plane's last communications that Kuala Lumpur sent out its first distress signal. And then it wasn't for another 5 hours after this distress signal that the first search flights went out to look for it. Which, if they had reported it sooner, I feel like this was really make or break, because if they had reported it sooner, then, you know, ground stations and other aircrafts could have started looking for it, especially while it was still in the air. I feel like that's when they would have had the best chance to look for it, but obviously the first flights didn't go out for 10 hours and 13 minutes after the last transmission, which is crazy. And I feel like, I don't know, I'm not going to get into it too much, but I just think the whole thing was handled really poorly, and not even just in this way. You know, officials from Malaysian Airlines and government officials were all very unhelpful. Malaysian Airlines released false information, and military air traffic controllers apparently saw the aircraft way off course and didn't do anything about it because it was friendly. So it wasn't a threat to them, so they didn't bother to do anything about the fact that this aircraft was literally way off course. But anyway, a search and rescue mission was launched in Southeast Asia pretty soon after the disappearance of the plane. About a week later, they moved the search efforts to the Southern Indian Ocean. And this is literally the biggest search effort in aviation history and the most expensive. 19 vessels and 345 military aircraft units were searching a 45 million kilometer squared radius in the ocean. They also searched about 1,800 kilometers of the sea floor just off of Perth. But obviously nothing was found. Otherwise we wouldn't be here making this video, would we? By March 30th, the Australian government had launched the Joint Agency Coordination Centre, and they launched this in an effort to find MH370, and it consisted of Chinese, Australian and Malaysian governments. And then in January of 2015, the Malaysian government released an official statement declaring the disappearance an accident. On January 17th in 2017, the official search for flight MH370 was called off, and literally nothing had been found except just a few pieces of debris here and there off of the coast of South Africa and like a few islands around South Africa, like Madagascar, somewhere called Reunion, I think it's called. Although in January of this year, 2018, a private US company decided to do their own search of 112,000 kilometers, but this concluded in June 9th of this year without them finding anything. So yeah, it's pretty crazy that there was such a massive search effort that cost so much money and the plane was never found. This is a huge plane, so the fact that it just disappeared like that and they never found it, out of all of the searching that they did, is so crazy to me. And it also kind of gets you thinking about how huge our ocean is. Like, I read something that we've only searched like 5% of the ocean, which is insane because like we live with it, it's on our planet and we know nothing about it. So yeah, I just feel like it really makes you think about how huge the ocean is, that this massive plane, like it is literally 74 meters long, they just never found it, and they searched like 45 million squared kilometers. It's crazy. Also, another thing to think about in this situation that's pretty crazy is the black box. And if you don't know what the black box is, it is basically this indestructible thing that every single plane has, which is there in case of a crash or anything, so that people can kind of figure out what happened in the last hours of a plane before it crashed, or you know, whatever else happened. It can carry about 2 hours of cockpit voice recordings and then 25 hours of flight data. So as I said, black boxes are literally indestructible, and this includes in water. So they will sink, but they have like this underwater locator beacon. And this beacon starts emitting a pulse as soon as the black box hits the water, and it can send out a pulse every second for 30 days until it runs out of battery. So by this logic, it would have been sending out pulses once a second until April 7th after the plane crashed. But yeah, like it was never found, which is crazy. Okay, so that is kind of the base of the information of what you need to know about MH370. So let's go ahead and get into some conspiracy theories. So the first conspiracy theory, and I have to say this is the one that I lean towards just a little bit, because I feel like it has the most evidence to support it, and that is that this was deliberately carried out by Captain Shah. So the main backing for this theory is that less than a month before the disappearance of MH370, well, I think it's a month before, some sources say 5 weeks, some say a month before, less than a month before, but he conducted a very, very similar Boeing 777 flight on his at-home simulator. And what he did was he took off from Kuala Lumpur and then he made a very sudden turn over the South China Sea and then again turned towards the Southern Indian Ocean where the plane ended up ditching. The very next day he conducted another simulated flight. This one was from Kuala Lumpur to Jeddah, which he was actually due to carry out the next day. And similarly, he ended up flying this one into the southern Indian Ocean. I believe information was also released where he simulated another flight where he flew it into the Petronas Towers, which, if you don't know what that is I don't really either, but they're like these really, really, really tall buildings in Kuala Lumpur. He did obviously try to delete all of these simulations, but nothing is ever really deleted from the internet, is it? And they were found on a shadow backup on his computer. The Australian Federation of Airline Pilots actually commented on this, and they never comment on any cases that aren't closed, and they said that this was nowhere near typical use, and they actually use this information to direct their search efforts. However, in their final report, they didn't comment on Shah's involvement. They also said that blaming Shah was hurtful to families. So as I mentioned earlier, in MH370's last moments, it took a sharp turn over the South China Sea, then back along the border of Thailand, and then it kind of hung over Penang for just a minute. So the thing about this is that Penang is actually Captain Shah's hometown. So some people believe that maybe he was looking over his hometown one last time before taking the plane and deliberately crashing it. The route that the plane took also kind of supports this theory, because it kind of makes it seem like he was trying, or whoever was flying the plane was trying to make it disappear. Aviation experts have even said that it was flying in a way that not only would it disappear from the ground flying, between different airspaces, but also in a way that it would completely disappear, physically, and that nobody would be able to find it. There was also another factor to this theory, because his marriage was actually falling apart. So he had a wife and children, and they were going through a bit of a rough patch. Both his wife and his daughter have said in interviews that he was acting very differently on the lead up to the disappearance of the plane. They said that he had been spending all of his time in his flight simulator room, and that he was becoming very distant and very agitated. But a lot of people don't believe this theory because, first of all, they think it's disrespectful. And second of all, he loved his job. He was a very experienced pilot. He loved what he did. And, he had children at home. So it's very hard to believe that someone would do something like this at all. Obviously, there have been instances where pilots have deliberately crashed their planes and killed everybody else inside. It's extremely selfish and very rare, so it is hard to believe that it would happen. So the next theory is something that is widely believed, and the Malaysian government and the Australian Transportation Safety Bureau have come out in support of this theory, is that everybody died, or this all happened because of an oxygen deficiency. This theory is that basically the entire plane, including Captain Shah, were all unconscious due to an oxygen deficiency for whatever reason caused it, and that it just flew on autopilot until eventually it ran out of fuel and ditched in the ocean. To me, this kind of seems far-fetched, because I don't know much about planes, but I feel like a plane on autopilot wouldn't make all of these sudden turns, and all of the turns seem very deliberate to, fly between airspaces, and to fly so far out into the deep southern Indian Ocean definitely seems to me like that's not something that autopilot would do. And it seems to me like someone had to have been flying the plane, or have some control over it. So anyway, there are multiple theories in this theory, and one of them is that maybe the oxygen deficiency was caused by Shah, so everybody else was unconscious except for him, and then he just kept flying the plane until it ran out of fuel and he ditched it, or it ditched. Another version of this plane is that this was some sort of hijacking, and that somebody deliberately damaged the oxygen tank. And the last version of this theory is that there was some sort of accident that harmed the plane's mechanics and then affected the oxygen supply. Some have actually speculated that there were cracks in the plane because 6 months before the disappearance, a HS aviation watchdog warned airlines that Boeing 777s had a problem that could lead to a mid-air breakup or catastrophic failure, or a catastrophic drop in pressure. A final warning was actually issued for this 2 days before the disappearance because a 15-inch crack had been found in the fuselage of a Boeing 777. However, Boeing has come out and said that this warning did not apply to MH370 because it had like a different antenna to the rest of the Boeings or something. There is also a theory about a mystery passenger. So according to Andre Milne, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but he said that the official manifest report for this aircraft said that there were 239 people on board. He says that there were officially 226 people on board because 4 people failed to board. There was also 12 crew members, which brings the official number of people up to 238 people. So that obviously means that there would be an extra person on board. Some people think that there was this extra mysterious passenger on board who hijacked the plane or took control of the plane or something. Maybe they were the one who damaged the oxygen. And Andre Milne, I don't know if I said, but he was a volunteer investigator. And the official investigation actually came out. They said they were aware of the discrepancy and that there were definitely 227 people on board. He said the discrepancy came from a computerized load sheet which was sent off 2 hours before the plane took off. And actual figures of this can differ due to, last minute changes, such as the 4 people who ended up not boarding. The next theory is that the plane was shot down by US military ops. In May of 2014, a book was published which was called Flight MH370: The Mystery. And this book claimed that the plane was shot down during a US Thai strike fighter jet exercise. This book claimed that the search was thrown off on purpose as a cover-up, so they were always searching in the wrong location and that's why they never found the plane. The same year, actually, another Malaysian Airlines Boeing 77 was shot down with it was over Ukraine with a surface-to-air missile. So this obviously fueled a lot of people's theories about this, and some people thought that maybe this same thing that happened to this Boeing 77 also happened to flight MH370. As always with conspiracy theories, there are always an alien abduction theory. I mean, what would a conspiracy theory be without aliens? I 110% believe in aliens. I think it would be naive not to. This universe is so huge. I just can't imagine believing or how people believe that we are the only life form in this entire universe. I just don't think it's possible. Every single part of my being believes in aliens. But that being said, I never ever believe alien abduction stories or UFO sightings or whatever. So of course this theory stemmed from the fact that the plane literally disappeared out of thin air, all of these search efforts, and nothing was ever found. It is literally a massive plane and just disappeared off the face of the planet. So people think that maybe it was just plucked out of the sky by aliens and, taken off and experimented on, or, whatever aliens do. So another theory is that this was a hijacking. I know I've spoken about this before, but I'm going to get into a little bit more detail. There are actually 2 theories within this theory. So there is the theory that it was actually physically hijacked, and then there is also the theory of cyber hijacking. And I'm gonna get into the cyber hijacking in just a second, but I'm gonna talk about the physical hijacking conspiracy now. So according to this theory, Israeli agents plan to crash this plane into a building and then blame it on Iran. And I think the whole reason that this grew any traction is because there were 2 men from Iran on this plane, and they were actually using fake passports. Some people even say that the CCTV footage of these 2 men may be doctored to, I guess, some sort of cover up. It's extremely unfortunate that, 2 men from Iran board a plane with fake passports, and then there is some sort of, terrorist theory, when in actuality, these two men were boarding under different passports. One of the men was 19 and one of them was 29. One was pretending to be Italian and one was pretending to be Austrian, and they were just using this so that they could try and immigrate. Okay, so as for the cyber hijacking, there was actually there's two theories within this theory. A little bit confusing here. So it's like a theory within a theory within a theory right now. But so there was technology that was designed to prevent another 9/11 style attack where they could control planes remotely. And some people think that maybe this was used because this plane actually did have this technology installed into it. So some people think that maybe this was used to hijack the plane. This could probably also tie in with the theory that the plane was shot down and maybe they used this technology to try and cover it up. But similarly, another cyber hijacking theory is that somebody actually hacked into the computers on the plane and maybe they reprogrammed it to crash or to land somewhere remote. Maybe everybody on MH370 is alive and being kept on this island and they're being held captive and just nobody knows about it, and that's why we never found the plane, which I think is very, very far-fetched. But a very, very popular theory is that the disappearance was caused by a fire on the plane. So this theory, which is kind of similar to the oxygen theory that I talked about earlier, is that there was a fire on the plane which caused everyone to pass out and then it just flew on autopilot until it ditched. But there is another more plausible theory to this theory. So the theory is that there was a fire on the plane, of course, and this is what caused Captain Shah to turn around and to try and find somewhere close for the plane to land. In this theory, they justify him turning off all of the electronics by saying that he was trying to isolate the problem or the fire and figure out what was going on. There is an island that I cannot pronounce at all, so I'm just going to put the name of it on the screen, that he could have been trying to land at. The plane in its endeavors actually climbed to 45,000 feet, and they explain this away by saying that maybe he was trying to climb to this altitude to extinguish the fire in a last ditch effort to get rid of the fire. But eventually Captain Shah got overcome by the fire. He passed all the smoke and passed out, and then the plane just kind of continued on autopilot until eventually it ditched. What this theory doesn't account for though is that the plane seems to have maneuvered in a way that it couldn't on autopilot after it had already passed this island. And the last theory is that the plane is somewhere on a remote island. Some have suggested that the plane was captured by the US and taken to the US military base, which is on the atoll of Diego Garcia, or that it was actually landed directly on the island. Or even that this is possibly where the plane was shot down. Anyway, several sources have claimed that Captain Shah, using his flight simulator, had trained to land on 5 different sort of runways like these islands in the ocean that were about 1,000 meters long. And Diego Garcia was actually one of these. 2 journalists from a newspaper in the Maldives actually claim that a bunch of people on the island had seen a plane flying extremely close to the southern end of the Maldives. They said they saw it at around 6:15 a.m. on March 8th. They said it had red stripes, which is what Malaysian Airlines has, and that it was flying to the southern tip of the Maldives. The 2015 discovery of debris that was found on the coast of La Reunion, which I don't know if I'm saying that right again, had a lot of people, it kind of confirmed the theory for them that the plane had landed in Diego Garcia. Although oceanographers have come out and said that the debris which was found in Reunion would definitely match up with where they thought it crashed, so in the southern Indian Ocean. So I think this is what makes this series so crazy and unbelievable to me, and people who believe this I feel are crazy, because they're trying to say the debris, which is confirmed to have been from MH370, is not real. So they're just dismissing evidence in order to continue believing their theory. But anyway, that brings us to the end of this video. I would love to know what you guys think, what your theory is on this, on what happened to flight MH370. And I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and hopefully I will see you in my next one. Bye guys.